Everything must change, and technology has changed.
Everyone will change. Everything will change. Everything must change. Nothing stays the same. No, no. Everyone must change. Nothing stays the same. The young become the old. Mysteries do unfold. 'Cause that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. There are not many things in life you can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds and sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds do fly. Winter turns to spring. A wounded heart will heal. Yes, it will, but never much too soon. Everything must change. The young become the old. Mysteries do unfold. 'Cause that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. And there are not many things in life you can be sure of, except rain falls from the clouds and sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds do fly.
This presentation is going to examine the educational technological advances of the 1950s through the 1970s, as well as establish the interrelationship between the technological advances of these decades with other facets of society that manifested during these times. America had just saw the end of World War II in 1950, when it then became engaged in several other major conflicts. America then experienced the Korean War, the Cold War, and then the Vietnam War, which lasted until 1975. In spite of these conflicts, America was able to experience improvements in technology, especially those improvements that impacted education. I chose to examine these decades because these were a time of war and economic strife. I believe it important to look into technology innovations that were able to surface during these difficult times, for it shows how a society can continue to grow and strive during turbulent times. There were several key educational, technological advances that took place during these war eras. During the 1950s, the first education computer was a computer-driven flight simulator for MIT pilots, and the first computer used with children were developed. During the 1950s, the Plato computing system was widely used in education. During the 1970s, computer-assisted instruction began, and in 1977, the first microcomputer in schools was used. Also during the 1950s and the 1960s, we saw a new focus on the use of auditory and visual materials to enhance instruction. Jawinski and Melinda, 1998, posited that this great paradigm shift occurred during a time when B.F. Skinner introduced his first teaching machine in 1954. Also, program instruction and other major school demonstration projects were underway between 1957 and 1962. It was during the 1950s that television became the mass media. The American Cultural History website states that in the 1950s, the number of hours that young people watched TV steadily increased, a trend that has not changed much today. These advances were able to ignite and prosper during a time of war and social unrest. Racial segregation in schools was ruled unconstitutional in 1954, so perhaps then the African American children could benefit from the same technological educational advances as their white counterparts. Now let's closely examine other facets of society that were influential on technology and how technology may have influenced them. As mentioned earlier, the 1950s was a time of war. In spite of this state, technology continued to influence society, business, and education. The introduction of the computer to society and to education changed the way in which people worked, learned, and communicated. B.F. Skinner based his teaching machine on the principles of operant condition that defined programmed instruction. Learning principle that is still prescribed today. Business industries' philosophies were also impacted. The microcomputer added automation to the workplace, revolutionized the way in which people work. In the music industry, jazz artists were able to lay multiple tracks and add improvisation to their musical artistry. The 1960s saw a time of continued war. The Cold War had ended in 1953 and the Vietnam War was underway. During the late 1960s, education saw the initiative of computer-based instruction. The primary focus of this type of instruction was to introduce computer literacy and to present the computer as a tool to solve problems, Lorton and Cole. The mid-1970s saw the end of the Vietnam War. During this time, Americans experienced many new initiatives in education. For example, in 1973, Landa proposed the algoheuristic theory. In 1975, Mager introduced criterion reference instruction, and in 1978, Vygotsky presented his social development theory. But what is the interrelationship between sectors of society and technology? Mutafar maintains that science and technology are the best thing that society could ask for. Since the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, science and technology has been in place. Mustafa further posits that some sectors that have been boosted by science and technology are energy, physical sciences, information, and communication. Furthermore, infrastructure in the society has grown with the help of science and technology. Modes of transport, like electronic railway lines, were realized, and these actually benefited the society by offering them a better means of transportation. In the past, almost everything was analog, but thanks to science and technology, we are now being digitized day by day. The invention of the telephone and radio services has broadened human communication during the 50s through the 70s. Mustafa further maintains that without society, then there would be no science and technology, and that is why the invention of certain tools and equipment have helped us to maintain achievement.